Today I am catching up with a super cool former student of mine. His name is Myles. And I'm just so excited to catch up and figure out. I'm so excited to catch up and see what Myles have going on. Myles.
Hi.
Myles with a Y.
Yep.
How are you today?
I'm pretty good. I've been on winter break for a couple days now, so that's been enjoyable. I've just been at home, not doing much, not gonna lie, or looking around at like internships and things. But besides that, I've just been laying around.
Hey, you need that break. You've been in school, it's been intense. I've heard you doing some research, so I can't wait to talk about that either. But first, Myles, tell us who are you? Where are you from? And what school did you go to?
Right. So my name is Myles. I'm from Hyde Park in Chicago, Illinois. I went to Whitney Young for high school in Chicago, and then when I graduated, I went to, or I'm going to, currently University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
All right. So you're currently at Michigan. And what did you decide to major in at Michigan?
Yes, so my major is cognitive science, and my minor is linguistics.
Cognitive science and linguistics. So, what made you pick that major?
Okay, so when I graduated high school, I wasn't 100% sure about what I wanted to like stick with for the next
Mhm.
few years. There's time you have in college to think about that. You usually don't have to declare like your major like solidly and like commit to it until like partway through sophomore year. Um, but I entered Michigan on the POSSE STEM Scholarship. So I was looking for something very STEM oriented, and I was kind of debating between. I knew I wanted to do something with like thinking and like the brain, so I was thinking about like psychology,
Mhm.
neuroscience, cognitive science. I thought cognitive science was an interesting major because it allows you to get into a lot of other things as well.
Mhm.
Um, so like once I started taking classes at Michigan doing research, I found out that I like linguistics a lot, and I found that cognitive science like has a track where you can take linguistics classes and they count kind of for both linguistics and for cognitive science. I thought that was really interesting. There are other things you can do in cog sci as well. You can do cog sci like with more psych, cog sci with more like philosophy. A lot of people like to do cog sci with like when they study like economics. It's kind of an interesting thing to go together there. So I liked how many things you could do with it. Really, that's why I picked it.
I love that. And before we get into that, because that's super interesting, Myles, describe your personality for me.
My person, um, I think I am probably more reserved in general. I guess once I like get to know people, it's different. Uh,
Mhm.
but right now I'm on a camera, so. But like when we were at like the museum, it's like when I've known these people for like months and we work together on these tasks, and I'll be more outgoing with them. Uh, I think people describe me as more like laid back though and calm. So
You're very laid back, you're very calm, and you are also someone that loves to help people. And that's okay. Once you get warmed up, you're a talker.
yeah.
Okay. So Myles, remember how I used to say, tell me some good news. So tell me like something that you would like to share that is a good news to you.
Yeah, so one thing I'm working on right now is my honors thesis project, which is basically just a research project that um, I kind of designed on my own, and I made it on a topic that I'm interested in. Um,
Mhm.
I made my honors thesis about video games because I like to play video games a lot, and I think they're really interesting. The way that you can like integrate things like psychology and cog sci with that. Um,
Mhm.
so my project's basically looking at if people behave differently when they're playing as different characters in a game. And part of that is getting a survey done, sending it out to people who play the game and getting their opinions on like how you should act when you play a
Mhm.
certain character. And
Mhm.
that involved the whole process of working with like IRB, and submitting my survey for approval, basically saying like this is what it's going to be about, this is the information I'm going to collect from my respondents, and then they have to approve it and say like this is okay, like everything is accounted for here. Then you can send it out to people. So that got
Mm.
approved 2 days ago. So I was able to send it out finally. Um, it was it was kind of a long process because there were things I didn't know about that I learned along the way. Um, there was one major thing was that since my survey is kind of available to anyone in the world who wants to take it, I'm just putting it like out on the internet for people to respond to. There are laws for like countries outside the United States where you have to have certain things included in your consent form. You need to have even like a separate consent form if you're responding to it from that country. So because my survey is international, I had to include some more things in it than my original draft had. So I went through a couple more drafts, and then they finally approved it like right in time for winter break. So that was nice.
Awesome, and let me ask you this, Miles. Will I be able to include that link into this episode where if someone wants to take that survey, they can do that?
Yeah, sure. I can give that to you after. It's in a certain video game, so it's basically asking if you have experience playing it or like watching other people play it. Then it'll
Mhm.
just ask you on some of the different groups of characters on it. So yeah, I can definitely include that.
So let me sum this up and correct me if I'm wrong. So basically, you're doing a survey on, do people kind of get in character? Do they become somebody else? Do they get into character when they're playing video games?
Yeah, essentially. My idea is that some characters are meant to they have different roles. Like within the game, it's like a team game where you compete against another team of like real players. And
Mhm.
so some characters are made to like say like defend for your team or to like protect them, or to like kind of be the one in charge and like initiate for your team. So I'm thinking that when you play those kinds of characters that have a lot of agency and like are a vital part of like the team's success in terms of like if this guy doesn't protect you, then your team's gonna lose. If this guy doesn't take charge, then your team's gonna lose. I feel like that people when they play those characters will then take on in their speech, like in their how they communicate with their team, they're gonna start taking on
Mhm.
like those. So if you play as a character that's like very engaged and very like how would I say aggressive, then maybe you take on like more aggressive speech, like you start speaking more frequently, like faster, or you start using like
Mhm.
more like telling your team to go or telling them to like attack, things like that. So it's kind of a combination of like psychology and linguistics is what I'm looking at.
That's awesome, and so I can't wait, everyone. We are going to drop Miles' link for the survey. If you are interested in taking it, especially if you're a gamer, please, please, please take this survey. This is so awesome, Miles. Here, let's start off here before we go back into your college experience.
Mhm.
Can you tell us about the POSSE Scholarship? You have received, um, full tuition to attend the University of Michigan as a POSSE scholar. So can you tell us what a POSSE scholar is?
Yeah, so essentially what the POSSE Scholarship is a program that's made to get like a diverse group of some student leaders like from one place. So there's POSSE kind of all over the country. There's POSSE for like LA, there's POSSE for Chicago, I think there's POSSE for like New Orleans and things like that. Um, and the idea of it is that you're getting together like a bunch of students that they have confidence in and providing them with resources as they transition to college together. So it's a group of 10 students, and the idea is that you want to stay connected with them because you're all from the same place, and you kind of can share an experience in that. And so when you go into a new environment, like leaving the state for college, um, you kind of have that piece of home with you, and it makes the process, like the transition, a lot smoother and easier. Um,
Mhm,
they do provide resources like a program of like so we had STEM immersion. Our on my posse posse Michigan from Chicago is like a STEM based program, so all of us are STEM majors. So we had an immersion time where we basically got to meet with like professors who work at the university in STEM and learn like kind of take like a mini class basically from them and learn about like how campus works and things like that. I thought it was really interesting. And then once we actually moved onto campus, then we had like a mentor that we met with multiple times a month to kind of track our progress and make sure that we're kind of progressing well in college. So it's basically a program that uh, makes the transition really easy, and then kind of provides you with what you need to like get all the way through college.
Wow. And how do you become how do you become a Posse Scholar? Like, is it something that you can just apply for, or you have to be nominated for it?
Yeah, so it is a nomination based program. So I was nominated by, thankfully, you and Marvin at MSI, which was very nice. Um, and so once you get nominated by a program that can provide nominations, or you can get nominated by a Posse Scholar, like an existing Posse Scholar or alumnus, they can also nominate you. And then that is how you can attend the first round of interviews. And then you kind of progress through two other rounds of interviews. And at the end, you can become a Posse Scholar. Yeah.
Awesome. And so you went through all the rounds, and now you are living your best life with you're coming out with no debt.
That is, yeah, it's very nice to not have to worry about that for sure.
Congratulations, Mal. That is so awesome. What is one valuable thing that you learned from high school transitioning to college?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing that I started in high school and that I've continued to do is just like being on top of the work and kind of getting it mostly done with first before I go and do other things. Like in high school, I would go to school, come home, and immediately just work on whatever I need to work on. Because I know I wouldn't want to do it. If I go home and I'll play this game, or like I'll watch this show before I do my homework, I know I'm not going to want to do it. So I've kept that like style of working on things basically since
Mhm.
high school. So when I come home from my classes, I work on something at least before I go on and um, do something else, like play a game with my friends or go out to eat or something like that. I've kept doing that, and I think it's kept my work ethic good because
Mhm.
otherwise it would be procrastinating will make it a lot harder, a lot harder of a process. So I avoid that by just getting on it when I get assigned things usually.
That's amazing. And let me ask you this, Miles, that might have contributed to why you have become a Posse Scholar too, because sometimes students, procrastinate on things and they don't give it their best. But the fact that you're on it and you're making sure that you take care of those tasks, it's helped you go through those rounds and be prepared.
Yeah, and I think that another thing I kind of did that helped me is it would be hard sometimes to like fully devote time to like one task, say like one essay or like one project. I would find myself like I would get like stuck or like bored, and then my productivity would go like way down at a certain point.
Mhm.
Um, so what I also like to do sometimes is just like I have like maybe three assignments, and they're due like days and days. They're not if they're not due like tomorrow, then I'll do a third of this essay every day, and then I'll know for sure I'll be done in 3 days, and I only have to write like say like 10 sentences worth of work, and I can be like this is like a measurable amount that I'm like gonna do today, and then once I'm done with that I can feel like accomplished and have like a plan to finish it still, and then I'll move on to like other things. So I'll do like 10 sentences of this essay. I'll do 2 slides of this presentation I got to do. um, and I like that better because it's like a measurable amount of success, and it's like you're progressing toward a goal without having to like sit down and grind the whole thing out.
That is an awesome, like, strategy, like, taking your assignments in chunks, still getting it done, still feeling accomplished, like, you don't have to just sit down and do everything. That is actually a really good strategy. And, of
Thank you.
course, Miles, you would be I mean, and efficient. So and I love it. That's a great strategy. Let me ask
Thank you.
you this. Um, what what was your decision? What was one of your deciding factors to choosing University of Michigan?
Okay. So in the Posse like application process, um, part of what you do is like once you're kind of at like the end and you're getting into like the final round interviews, you do like choose a school that you like would like to commit to if you are accepted for the scholarship. So Posse had a list of about I want to say 10 to 12 like partnered schools that they work with. So those were the options, and I chose Michigan. Um, One, because I thought a STEM experience would be interesting. Michigan was the only like posse cohort that's like specifically STEM oriented. For the other ones, you can be, any major really. But for the Michigan one, it's specifically STEM focused.
Mhm.
And I also chose it because it, I think, was the university experience that I was more looking for. Some other schools were like, they're still interesting. But they were smaller, or they were located in like other places I wasn't as interested in. But going to Ann Arbor, going to like a really large school, going to a Big Ten school, I thought were also really interesting. Um, I also knew that Michigan's programs in like psychology were especially like really, really good and really highly rated. Um, they're really invested in research at Michigan, and
Mhm.
it shows. I got research all 4 years, so uh, it had a lot of it checked a lot of boxes, and it had a lot of things I was interested in overall. I think.
It checked all the boxes. Miles, I am shocked that you chose a big school because you're so reserved. So I would think, just from my assumptions, and I shouldn't assume, I assumed that you would go somewhere small, but you did totally opposite. So you love like the big school life.
I thought it would be a more interesting way to go about it. Um, just because at a big school, a lot of things are different. I don't know. You can meet a lot of people, like from a lot of different places, which is really cool. I've met people, like from other states, from other countries. Um,
Mhm,
and I guess in my head, like the college experience is that of a larger school. So I felt like,
mhm.
oh, if I'm, get this experience like going out and being in the real world, I should do it somewhere where there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in Michigan. So
How many?
60,000, something between 50 and 60,000. It's a lot.
Yikes.
I
So
think. I
you're
think it's.
definitely a number
Oh yeah,
in those
there's.
general classes.
Oh yeah, I the general classes were large, and I'm glad that I didn't have to spend much time in them, and I got to like specialize and get into like the more particular stuff later.
So, Miles, what are 2 things that you value attending Michigan?
Okay, I think one thing which I think is important and I do value is that, kind of like I said, you meet a lot of different people when you go to a large university. And I think that made it a lot more of like a real world experience, if that makes sense.
Mhm,
Um, going to like school in Chicago, and I mean, just living like my whole life in Chicago is one thing, and I love Chicago, and I, plan to come back. But I think it's really important to go out and meet people who aren't from Chicago, who think considerably different from me, even if I'm not like necessarily changing my views on anything, but just meeting people that think differently from myself.
mhm,
I think it allowed me to think critically about a lot of things.
mhm,
Um, and how do I say this? It's like, because it wouldn't necessarily be people I like. I don't have the same ideals as them, if that makes sense. But I
mhm,
still think it was still important to meet those people because those people exist in the real world, and it's not like
and they
I
do.
can't live like living with people who think the same as me because that's just not realistically how the world is. Um,
It's not.
so I think it's a really important experience to get at Michigan.
And that's a nice refreshing perspective coming from you and your generation. Um, Miles, you would be Gen Z or Gen Z, right?
Yeah, Gen Z. Gen Alpha is still really young right now, I think.
Yeah, that's the generation my baby is in.
Hmm.
Yeah, because what ends up happening is that you're taught that you can't even listen to someone else's opinion, even if it's different from yours. You don't have to buy into it. But people are gonna have different opinions based on their perspective, how they were raised, their backgrounds, what they're introduced to. So it's really refreshing for you to say that, you do understand people are going to have difference of opinions and that you're in this environment to, immerse yourself in it and how you're going to go about doing those things. So that
Yeah.
is nice. Okay. Miles is not part of the cancel culture.
Mm, well, I, it was the thing. It was the thing. Excuse me. That Posse talked to us about as well. The kind of that when we were going to this university, we like looked at like the demographics of Michigan, which if you haven't looked at them are, I mean, it's a PWI, obviously.
Mhm.
It's a very small black population. Well, proportionally, I think it's like 4 or 5%. Like it's a very small proportional amount of people that
Mhm.
go there. And we were talking about how for some people who are going to this university, like this is their first time being in an environment even this diverse. That's even 5%, you know, black or however many percent of minority people, and how we will meet such people, and it's not necessarily like our responsibility as minorities to like educate people about how to be like respectful and things like that, but we need to be aware that those people exist, and that we may be asked to work with them or maybe have like converse with them, and that is just a real thing that happens. So it's like um
Mhm.
well, I do think there are definitely still ideas that I'm like I in my mind and like in my ideas I don't tolerate. It's I think valuable that I would still need to experience like being around
Okay. I hear you.
that.
Miles, 5%. Wow. Do you feel supported as an African American male at Michigan?
I think yes, and I think mainly because of two things. One, because of Posse. Posse
Mm,
was definitely, and then two, because of the efforts actually of the Black Student Union at UNISH are like really interesting and really good. So there's a building called the Trotter Multicultural Center, where BSU usually meets, and they are making sure to kind of always keep the history of like Black Americans at Michigan in mind. I went to a session once where they basically just went through like the entire history from its creation, even from before its creation, um,
mhm,
into now, and they're talking about all the times when uh, there have been like incidents, and that the Black students at Michigan, or even just like the minority students at Michigan, like made their voices heard. They went to administration. They had like their protests. So part of how like the multicultural center got built is because of the demands of like Black students and minority students at Michigan, um, wanting to like
mhm,
have a space where they could discuss these things and to not be like discriminated against. Um,
mhm,
so I think they like the people in charge of that club, in charge of that like organization, like really do care about those things. So it was really interesting seeing like how it all came to be. So I do attend BSU events from time to time. It's definitely I definitely done it more like in my more like my junior senior year.
mhm.
One, because I entered school in COVID and like there wasn't really much to do
Oh,
around here when it was full online. But as it like moves more into in person, I started getting more involved and stuff like that.
that's awesome. So you found your community at the University of Michigan.
Mhm.
All right. Well, as long as you're supported, and I do know that you have such a supportive family too, so that also plays a part too.
Mhm.
Let me ask you this, diving into your research, I remember just having, coffee or tea with you over Thanksgiving break, and, um, you talked about code switching in part of your research, and I thought that was really interesting. So can you tell me what type of undergrad research that you're doing?
Yeah, so the lab I currently work in, I've been in since the start of junior year, and I had an experimenter for it where basically we were looking at Black students at UMich, and seeing kind of the effects, the things that can trigger a person to code switch, meaning like changing basically the way that you speak, kind of like the dialect that you're speaking in, depending on like your environment and on who you're talking to, on like the situation that you're in. Um, and we were looking at that and seeing like, is it causing them stress? Is it making it harder for them to like engage in other tasks if they have to code switch while they're doing these tasks? And basically just seeing like all these both like mental like psychological and then like also physiological effects on a person when they have to code switch.
Wow. So is it stressful from
Uh,
what you're seeing?
yes, it's definitely we collect it in a number of ways. So we have like blood pressure. It's really funny actually. Like when we have them do this experiment, we hook them up to all these these machines. So they have like a blood pressure cuff on their arm. They have a belt around their sort of like their stomach, their waist to measure like their breathing. That helps like measure like the breathing rate, which you can usually breathe. You breathe like faster when you're more stressed. We also have things like we collect saliva samples for cortisol, which shows up as like a sign of stress when it's in your saliva. So it's very interesting, I think, from the experimentee, I guess, perspective when we're like, come in,
Mhm.
we're gonna have you talk to some people, but also put on this belt, put on this other belt, put on a blood pressure cuff, and also spit in this cup at the end for us, please. But it's useful data that we collect for sure.
Mm. And so have you seen a lot of the subjects to be sorry, have you seen a lot of the students that are part of this study to be stressed when they do this?
Yeah, so on the experimenter end, it does seem so. I don't always have access to the data like directly. I'm in the room with them usually when they're doing a lot of their things, so I'm not necessarily always having access to like the data as it's happening. Um, but from what I see, like when they're being asked to, part of what they're asked to basically do is give a speech to like a panel very briefly that they like have prepared for. And when they kind of get in that situation of code switching, you can tell that like there might be some hesitation or like kind of further thinking about what they want to say, um, which is kind of interesting because there's then the talk about like how much of code switching is what someone does like consciously and how much of it is just like automatic, like you just do it when you're in a certain situation without even thinking about it. So I think that's also an interesting conversation to have about that.
I would think from experience that, that becomes subconscious for a lot of people because a lot of people talk about code switching. That's just something that you do.
Hmm.
And, what was so funny? I did see a oh, look at me. You know what is so funny? I did see this clip of Mario Lopez having tacos with this guy, and people were like, "This cannot be his authentic accent. Like, is this Mario Lopez? Like, there's no way." He definitely code switches when he's on TV.
Yeah,
So he talked about it. He was like, "Yeah, I code switch," because they was just like, he really knows about these tacos. Like, he's really certifiable." And then they was listening to his dialect, and they're like, "Oh my god, he does code switching down."
yeah, it's the thing that I think it's a part of a lot of our lives, which is why I'm really happy to like be able to do research on it. I like to do research that could have like a substantial impact on like a good number of people, and I feel like code switchers are literally everywhere. So it is a thing that like once we get our results, is going to be like something worth looking at for a large majority of people who, um,
Mhm,
in like some environment of their lives, whether it be like at home or like at work or at school. Or when you're like
mhm.
with a certain cultural group, that you change the way that you speak, whether it is on purpose or not.
So what's the end all be all for this research? Are is the research saying like, "Hey, just be yourself," or "Hey, you should still code switch," or
Yeah. So kind of what we're looking for is whether or not it is still an in progress project. So like we're still working to clean the data, so we don't have the definitive like this is the result yet. But we're basically seeing,
oh,
and also
wait a minute, Miles, you cut out.
oh sorry, I
You
can
said you're
repeat.
basically seeing what?
Yeah. So you're basically seeing the first thing we're looking at is code switching like a stressor? Is it causing you stress? And then the second, is it impacting like cognitive load? So when you have to work on a task, like maybe where you have to memorize things, if you're code switching or if you had to code switch recently, does it make it more difficult to complete tasks like that? And the applications of that are like, if you're code switching in like say a work environment, does that make it more difficult for you to work or more difficult for you to like complete say like a project or your schoolwork? Um, and if we find that, then maybe that's a thing that, institutions can keep in mind when they're doing their training, like when they're working with these individuals that feel like they have to code switch when they're at work. So it's not necessarily like a don't code switch situation, at least to me. I think code
Mhm,
switching fine. It's kind of how I feel like it's part of how people like self-regulate and how like they feel comfortable in their environment. Um,
mhm,
but I think it's also important to like keep that in mind. Like if we do find results that are kind of consistent with the idea that code switching does kind of take up kind of a space in your mind when you're trying to do other tasks, um, I think it's just be important to keep that in mind, like when you're working in an environment where code switching happens.
okay. Alright. Well, there has been a bunch of code switchers that are at the top of the food chain there, so maybe that has become something subconscious. Alright, so rounding up, when are you going to be finalizing your degree? When are you gonna be graduating?
Uh, May of 2024. Um, I'm essentially like credits wise, I'm essentially done. I think my transcript says that I have to take one more credit of class. Um, but I'll also be doing like I'll finish writing like for my thesis and everything. So that's what I'll be focusing on for the next semester. And then when that's all done in like early April, then I graduate in early May.
Awesome. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about your passion. What
Mhm.
what was your passion in high school and what is it now?
Okay. In high school, I have to be honest, I wasn't really sure what was going on. I had a general affinity for like psychology and like brain mind related stuff. So I always thought that was really interesting. Um, but I didn't really know where to take that. So kind of as I said before, I was looking at these different brain mind related majors when I came in, and then
Mhm,
what helped me settle on cognitive science was when I worked on my first research project at Michigan, which was like a psychology plus linguistics kind of project, and I was like, oh,
mhm,
linguistics is a really interesting way to like look at how people like act and how they decide to do what they do. Um, so my passion became more oriented in like that after
mhm.
a time like working in that project and knowing that like this is the thing I'm interested in. So my passion kind of became how do people think, and then also how do people speak, depending on how they think.
Oh, okay. What about personally? Like any personal passion projects or like things that you were passionate about, like just personally?
Yeah, so I've always been into games since for like ever. So I, I mean, it was always like a hobby, as it is for like a lot of people. For me, and then I kind of thought about it, and when I was doing things like applying for my honors thesis, I was just kind of like, oh, I guess I could include games in my research or in like my academics if I wanted to, because they said I could do whatever I want. So I did. So I did a project about games, but then I also started to think about how academically or like in terms of a career, that is a thing I could also go for. Kind of making games like more interesting or just like improving existing games by keeping in mind like how people think and how people behave. I think that's a really valuable thing because you can be a company, you can make a really great game, but if it's not a game that people feel like they want to play or like a game that people feel like comfortable continuing playing, then it's
Mhm.
not going to be a successful game at all. So
Wow. So games is your thing. Games was your passion then, and it's definitely your passion now.
yeah, for sure.
Okay. Miles, let's talk about your humanitarian nature. What motivated you to volunteer as a teenager to inspire other kids?
Yes. So when I volunteered at MSI, starting I think I was 14 or 15 or
Yeah.
so. Uh, I had already like I live like on the south side, so I was already by MSI kind of. And a lot of the time I'd been to MSI like a number of times as like a child, whether it be like the school field trip was to MSI or for any other reason. And
Wait a
so
minute, hold on, Miles. Let's not use Emma. Let's just say the museum.
sorry.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
you're fine. You're fine. Just in case they're like, "Oh, she used this." You
Okay.
can just say, "I live by the museum." We can
Yeah.
go start with that.
Yeah. So living on the south side, I was always kind of by the museum, and I had gone there a number of times as a child, whether it be on like field trips or just going there with my family. So I'd been there a number of times, and I always really liked it when I went. It was like a really fun experience, and it was like the most fun I could have while learning. I think it was kind of
Mhm,
like I go to things like learning about the weather and about like electricity and like how the body works. And
mhm.
I was learning like I was in school, but it was always like an engaging, like fun experience. Uh, and so when I found out about the opportunity to volunteer there, um, I thought that'd be really interesting to like learn the ins and outs of the museum and then be able to basically be the person that I met when I came in when I was like 8 years old and things like that. And it
Mhm.
wasn't. I'm definitely glad that I did it.
I'm glad that you did too, because then I got a chance to meet Miles and be a part of your educational journey. So talking about that, um, Miles, are there any key takeaways from, you being a student in this volunteer program, with me as your educational mentor? Are there any key takeaways from that?
Yeah, I think the most salient one for sure was the be interested so you could be interesting, and also the vice versa, be interesting so you could be interested. Um,
Mhm.
that was definitely stuck for me. I think you would say it a number of times. It would be every Saturday morning, so it was like that's like the Tanita quote, and it kind of helped me like figure out my passions. Like once I got further on in school, where I was kind of like I could do these things where I am I do feel like I have like the skill in that field to maybe go into something uh related to maybe neuroscience and stuff like that. But I think following what I'm actually interested in is a lot better in terms of I think I would produce better work in a
Mhm.
field where I'm like this is what I really want to do. So that's kind of how I bridged further like into like video games and stuff like that because I know I like video games. I know I would like to work on video games, and so I know whatever work I produce in that field would be like something I'm really proud of.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, interesting so you can be interested, being interested so yeah, it's like, yeah, hello,
That was like the
you're
quote.
not going. Huh?
That was like the quote for
It
sure.
is because guess what? If you're not interesting, who's gonna be interested? And, at that time, which I think that your cohort did a really good job. Although, phones kinda run your life and you're kinda used to having this thing in your hand, once we got into the groove of things and we understood that, guess what? Take time away, get to learn you, learn something interesting, so when people talk to you, you have something interesting to say, and they'll be interested, right?
Mhm.
So I'm glad that stuck, Miles. That's really cool. And there are probably some other isms that I just kept doom, 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 doom all the time. But it was such a joy to have you and just to watch you grow and take on things that was not part of your personality, and sometimes it was outside of your comfort zone, but you did it anyways. You're just like, "I'm just gonna try it," which I felt was always groovy and cool to see you take on those things.
Yeah,
Now
it
let
was
me
great.
ask you.
Well,
I'm sorry, Miles?
I said it was great to have you as a mentor as well. It was very, I now I'm thinking about it, like I spent a lot of years like at the museum, and like with you and like the other administrators and also the other volunteers. So I think I learned a
Mhm.
lot from you.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, the people stay, right? So, I'm just so glad that you all just decide to still stay in contact with me, tell me what you're doing because I love it. Fantastic things like you can do whatever you put your mind to, but you got to put in the work, right? Some people go, "Oh, you can do anything, you put your mind to it." But like you said, I have to stay on top of my work. I have to break it off in increments. I don't want to procrastinate. Things are tough. And this is why you're also a Posse scholar, is because you stay on top of things. And it's in amongst all the other things you had going on, you were able to take in this nomination process and become a Posse scholar, amongst all the other stuff you were doing. So now you're doing research and you're probably going to be a published author by the time you graduate.
I've actually gotten to publish one paper with my lab, so that was a good experience for me. I got to publish one time, hopefully, multiple more times in the future. But yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to be looking to that. You're going to have to send me those published articles. Just send me a link so I can be like, "Oh my God, Myles is published again." Now let me switch gears to you. How is life in Michigan? You being a Chicago city boy, how is life in Michigan thus far?
Yeah, it's definitely quieter. Like, and don't get me wrong, Ann Arbor still has a lot of people for sure. Like all the students when school's in session. Also, there's just like a bunch of families that live around. But it's definitely not the same as living in the city. There are like good things about it and things I kind of miss about being home about it. Uh, the food in Chicago is better for sure. There's fine places in Ann Arbor, but it's I mean when you live in Chicago, it's the third biggest city in America. There's just a lot more options and a lot of cool stuff there. So I can't really fault them too much for that.
Mhm.
Um, I think there are things I do in Ann Arbor that I never really did too much in Chicago. I go on walks. I never went on walks in Chicago. That's not really where I'll just like go outside and be like, I'm just gonna walk in a direction and just see where I end up. Um, yeah, I mean, you can do that in Chicago. I didn't really do it, especially not like when it's darker out. But in Ann Arbor, um, it's not without issues or without crime, but it's definitely I feel like pretty safe environment to
Mhm.
do such a thing. So I can just kind of like roam the town at night and just go to places that I think like just look really interesting. I like to like just look at nice architecture and buildings and walk up by them and like take pictures. Um, that's not really a thing I did at home, and maybe it's something I should start doing at home. Uh,
You got the lake right there.
that's true. Maybe I should start, walking the lake more. I mean, walking by the museum. There's a lot of interesting things over there. So I guess I did a little walking, like when I'm taking like a break from volunteering a little bit. But I'm talking about like walking from like taking a step out of my door at home, just being like, okay, I'm gonna walk north and just go. I never, um, but I did do it at Michigan, so uh, maybe that's the thing I'll continue to do when I move back.
Yeah, I mean, they have the paths over there, by the lake. That'd be something interesting. You can go north and see a lot of interesting things, like, on that path.
For sure.
Yeah, pretty cool. Now, you're a cat dad. How is it being a cat dad? And tell me about your cats.
Yes, I do. I have two calico cats. I went to the shelter to adopt one cat, and then the cat that I picked, they told me that she was a part of a bonded pair and she had a sister, and that they are basically inseparable. So I was like, sure, let me just adopt a second cat. That surely won't. That's surely the same as adopting one cat. It wasn't, but it's still a very fun experience. Um, I think it's a good like exercise and like responsibility, just being like living by myself with these animals that I take care of. Um,
Mm.
they are very young and very active, so there are sacrifices I've had to make in the form of furniture, mostly
Oh, they scratch up the furniture.
a little bit. Yeah, it's the like TV stand and the couch are scratched up. But I've learned things. I have my strategies now. Uh, to keep it like still like my environment while I can also have these cats and have them happy and have them like healthy and well fed.
Yeah. Oh, your cat dad, Miles.
It's crazy. They like I didn't realize at the time, which I don't know how I didn't, but like how much having a pet
Mhm.
changes just like your lifestyle. I don't have to set an alarm anymore. They just wake me up because
Yeah.
they know what time it's time to eat. They just wake me up. I get up at 7 like 30 every morning because they have a clock in their bodies. It's like I haven't eaten yet and I know I'm supposed to eat right now. So
Yeah, that's so true. Like, you really don't need a alarm clock. My dog is like that, and most of the times he sleep all day. He sleeps
mm,
and he's like, "It's time for lunch, it's time to eat and it's time to take me out." But for sure, like, they do become your alarms. You don't even really need one anymore.
yeah.
So you are cat dad of 2, so you're doing it. Like, any more
It's good to
interesting.
have
You say what, Miles?
I said it's good to have two actually because in the event, I'll go to school or I'll go maybe away for like a day or two, then there's two of them, so it's not like they're alone. They can be with each other. They're also sisters, so like, it's not like they're just two random cats with each other.
Yeah, they're part of the same litter. So are you enjoying, adulting life?
Yeah, I have been enjoying it very much. There's a lot of freedom to do whatever I want. It's two sides to it. I think it's that I can do whatever I want, and then also I can do absolutely nothing if I want to, uh, which is good at times, but it's good in moderation. I think it's good
Yeah,
to get out and like try to do some stuff from time to time. But it's very easy to just be like, I'm not gonna do anything today. It
right.
is really nice, so I do enjoy it. It's really fun.
That's awesome. I like, the awareness of that. Like, I can do something or I can't, but I kinda do need to do something, and that's true. Sometimes you veg out, do whatever you need to, but, you gotta keep on ticking, so you have to you have to do something. So let me ask you this. What is one key advice that you would say that you're living with as a young adult?
Mhm. I think along the same lines, it's as an adult in like university, it's very easy on a day like or maybe you like finish what you're working on, done with your classes to just um go like straight home, like go to sleep or just do nothing.
Mhm,
And those days are good, and you should value them, and you should take them for sure time to time. But I think in general, it's good to like have some activity or like a hobby or like an extracurricular that you're interested in to do. It like keeps you active. It keeps you like engaged. And I think you'll get a lot more out of. I guess I'm talking specifically about college here, but
mhm,
you'll get a lot more out of your experience when you get to do those
mhm.
things. I think when I came to school in 2020, where there wasn't like you can really do you could do clubs and extracurriculars, but they'd be fully on Zoom, and it was kind of like not the experience that you would
I
want.
know. It
Like
was
you couldn't
not
do
the vibe.
yeah, like you couldn't do sports if you did a club. It was you all speaking to Zoom meeting, which is something I do appreciate that they were able to do that, but it's just not the same, So
Mhm.
definitely valuing that you can like go out and do things, take advantage of some of that extra time that you have to like go out and engage in something, whether it be like do like an intramural sport. I did dodgeball for fun, like for a couple of weeks. It was like a very low time commitment. It was like an hour out of my day once a week. Um, that I just went and played dodgeball with my friends. So it's just little things like that. Like it's exercise. I got out. I got to like talk to people. I got to meet new people, like the teams we were playing against. Um, just being able to do a little bit of that, I think makes your experience a lot more diverse
Mhm.
and a lot more interesting.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Yeah, wow, you survived the whole you entered in at 2020. Wow, that was woo, crickets on that campus, huh?
Yeah,
Wow.
it was a
Let
lot
me
of
ask
busy.
you a random question. How did y'all go about, um how did y'all go about when you had to go to the caf to eat?
So we did still have it. It was, how did it work? It's been a couple of years. Let me think for a second. So you had to be masked, of course, and I mean, it's not too dissimilar from what you had today. It's it was a long line because you had to be like a certain distance apart, and the process was like really short, or they're trying to like get people in and out really quick. Um, and then the dining halls themselves, you weren't allowed to like eat in them. You had to take your food and you had to go back to like your room with it, to eat it.
Mm,
So we kind of missed that like social experience of like just
yeah.
in the dining hall. That wasn't really a thing. All the seats were like empty. It was just fully like you go through this path. You go through this path through the building, and then you pick up whatever food you want, and you go straight back to your dorm. Um, you could do things like you could eat outside, like if it was warm enough outside, and you had friends to eat with. But there wasn't really an environment that was like this is where you can all eat together.
Yeah. Which is kinda important in college, like, that's bonding time and social time, yeah,
Yeah.
that's an important piece of college as well, like, you have to take time to be social.
Mm.
Uh, Miles, let me ask you this, what are you currently struggling with at the moment that you're trying to overcome?
Um, I think maybe making decisions for the future. I have like some ideas for what I want to do. But
Mhm,
part of why I am graduating and then taking a gap year is to learn a bit more about like myself and what I want to like commit to
mhm.
for the years to come. Um, so like this interest I've been talking about like in gaming is a more recent thing that I've gotten into in terms of like gaming with my academics. So I'm trying to see, is that a way that I can continue? Can I go for a master's degree in something related to this? Can I go for a PhD in something related to this? Um, Thinking about like what these PhD programs entail. So I'm doing a lot of research into these universities that I'm interested in, seeing like, what's the experience? What kind of courses will I be taking? What are the faculty members that you have there? What projects are they doing? Are they projects that I would want to be a part of? Is it like something that I feel like I could be passionate about and like devote my interest in? So you could say it's a struggle in that that's a lot to do for like a bunch of different universities, um, and balancing that with like the schoolwork I have to do and like my job. It's hard to find the time for it, and so I think that's part of why I'm doing a gap year so I can make the time to really make a decision that I'm like sure in that I can commit to for the next few years.
That's very smart, Miles. People have to be self-aware of that, you're setting up what's going to happen for you within the next 5 to 10 years. So sometimes it will take you to take a step back and say, let me see, I've accomplished this. This is where I'm at, and these are some of the things where I can go.
Hmm.
Definitely. Well, I look forward to hearing what step you decide to take, because whatever step you decide to take is going to be fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, the second I'm gonna go straight into like, all right, what am I looking at here?
Well, at least you're giving yourself time to do that instead of rushing into something and then spending 5, 6 years in it and you just don't want to do it.
Hmm.
That's really bad when, I mean, take a step back and you're doing the right thing. You're gonna get your degree, you're gonna take a gap year, figure this thing out, and then move forward. So I look forward to hearing about it.
Thank
Let
you.
me let me ask you, Miles, what do you think has contributed to your internal motivation?
To my internal motivation. Um, think about this for a second.
Yeah, because you are internally motivated to do great things.
I think it is partially like I think my interest in like research and things like that. Um, I think I like the idea of research, the idea that like I can be helpful to people. Like there are a lot of jobs you can do to be helpful to people, but I think research is great because it's a way to do that in like a very long lasting like way. Like when you publish a
Mhm,
paper, when you like work on a project, that paper just exists like forever, and
mhm.
that someone can cite later on when they do something that follows up on your research or improves on it. Um, if it's like something really like impactful, then maybe like entire like models are built on like what you did research on and what you wrote. And I like the idea of providing that like long lasting kind of effect on the world that way. So there are, yeah, a number of opportunities and ways to do that, but I think research is like a really strong way, and it's just fun. I don't know, like
Yeah.
it's I like the idea of like doing the work and then seeing its effects in real time.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like that makes me feel a lot better about the things that I do when I'm like, okay, this is like something that I did and it
Mhm.
had a substantial, like it did something, you know. And I think
Yeah.
a cool way to do that.
Listen, Miles, you have got to do what brings you joy. You know, you
Mm,
really do. And this is something that is that keeps challenging you and you see results and you want to keep pushing it. And then you want to push it to something that you're interested in, which is in the gaming industry. So I'm all here for it. Let me ask you this, and I think this may be my last question. What do you look forward to in the future?
so I look forward to well, finishing the research I'm doing this year. I've been doing this like, I guess it's not even a 1 year project, it's a 1 school year project. Um, and like being able to say like this is a thing that I developed and executed myself. I think that'll be really fun to finish. I'm looking forward to graduating. That'll be uh, really important to do, and also just a big accomplishment, I guess, as part of life. And from there, I'm looking forward to having some time to like to think and relax, and in my gap year, like embrace some things while I'm still doing like my research on my schools, and working. I'll have some more time to do uh, kind of get into like more things that I'm like passionate about, like hobbies, like learning, you know, instruments. I kind of want to learn like about coding and things like that. I can take that time once I've graduated to get more into those hobbies.
Oh my god, I look forward to that, and then I look forward to doing, like, a recap and catching up with you after the gap year. Well, there you have it. Catching up with Miles. Thank you so much, Miles, for taking time out to catch up with me. Hey, guys, like, subscribe, hit that subscribe button to find out more cool chat sessions with my former students and actually more people to come.